Hello, Brian Weeks here again with another MMCD contract consideration. This video clip will cover the topic of what exactly does GC 13.10 mean. Please note that GC 13.10 is the number in the Platinum Edition. Although this identical clause has been in the MMCD since day one, in earlier versions it was numbered as GC 13.9. Be advised that to fully understand this video, it helps to know the difference between a change and extra work as defined in the MMCD. If you're a bit fuzzy on this concept, please see my other contract consideration video entitled Change versus Extra. Recently, a question from a contract administrator was referred to me for comment. In essence, the CA wanted advice as to what markup should be allowed on some site overheads. I thought I knew the answer right away, but in discussion with him, I came to realize there were subtleties in his set of circumstances which needed to be considered. The issue centered about what GC 13.10 really meant and how it applied. After quite some consideration, and with the advice from another member of the original Documents Development Committee, I realized the answer is not simple. Consequently, I thought it'd be a good idea to explain our thinking in a contract consideration video for the benefit of other users, both CAs and contractors. Here's the real-life example that generated this video. The contract had been extended multiple times throughout construction. Some extensions were due to changes, others due to extra work, and others due to delays which were acknowledged by all to be owner-caused delays. All items had been properly authorized by change orders at the time and paid for using previously agreed force account rates. However, given the number of these change orders and the uncertainty about the net effect of their time impact, it was agreed between the CA and the contractor to leave the site overheads for reconciliation near substantial performance. This time had now come. Following GC 13.1, delay by owner, the contractor claimed for daily site overhead costs for the net time with a markup of 10% for overheads plus 10% for profit. The relationship between the CA and the contractor was good, and the CA was quite prepared to authorize whatever was correct. However, he was concerned about the language of GC 13.10, which seemed to imply that the delay clause was inoperable here. If this was correct, then indirectly GC 10 would apply, and that would limit the markup to 10% only. First, let's look at what GC 13.10 says in our Platinum Edition. Extensions to the contract time that are required because of a change or extra work shall be calculated pursuant to GC 7, 8, and 9. Such time extensions shall not be considered delays, and the provisions of this GC 13 shall not apply. On the face of it, that seems weird. We know that any time extension to the contract must be authorized and formalized with a change order, whatever the cause. GC 13 is entirely related to delays, the implications of who causes them, the requirements for acceleration or stoppage, the obligations of both parties, etc., etc. So why would we say that authorized job extensions requiring change orders would be exempt from delay provisions? The key to understanding this is in the definitions. A time extension granted on a change order is not necessarily a project delay. It may be, but more likely it is not. Any time extension which is granted to cover a change in schedule, which results from a change in the scope of the work, is not a project delay. It's simply a recognition that the work, as it is now defined, will take longer than anticipated at the time of tendering. This is the more common reason change orders are issued. On the other hand, change orders for time extensions which were generated purely to acknowledge owner-caused delays, weather delays, or delays due to third parties, the last two being classed as unavoidable delays, are a different type of situation. So, what are the consequences of this differentiation? What GC 13.10 states is that time extensions granted due to a change in scope are not covered by GC 13. Change orders acknowledging true delays do fall under GC 13. so those clauses in GC 13, which are appropriate to the circumstances, will apply. As two examples, GC 13.3 applies if abnormal weather caused the delay, and GC 13.5 applies if the CA delays providing additional instructions for more than 5 days after a request to do so. I prepared a logic diagram which may help clarify how to reason such a situation through the contract language. Number 1. As discussed, the first test is to determine if the time extension arose from a true delay or not. If so, follow the logic to the left. If not, follow the logic to the right. Following the logic on the left, A, if the delay was owner-caused, then GC 13.1.1 allows the contractor to recover all lost time as well as costs with markups of 10% for overhead and 10% for profit. But if the delay was unavoidable and neither party was responsible, then GC 13.3.1 allows the contractor to be awarded a time extension but no money. And finally, if the contractor was responsible, then there's no need for a change order at all. Let's follow the logic on the right. A, if the change scope is due to a quantity variation, then GC 9.4 sets the pricing protocol and GC 9.5 provides for time adjustment. B, if the change scope is due to extra work, then GC 8 and GC 9.2 deal with pricing. Again, GC 9.5 provides for time adjustment. C, otherwise the change scope is due to a change, so GC 7 and GC 9.2 deal with pricing, with GC 9.5 again providing for time. In all cases, if pricing cannot be negotiated to agreement, the fallback methodology is force account as detailed in GC 10.1.1. Under this GC, only burdened labor costs may be marked up at 10% for overhead plus a compounded 10% for profit. Equipment and materials are marked up simply at 10%, and subcontractor costs may be marked up only 5% for an administration fee. 5. It's interesting to note that the GC 10 force account provisions deal only with costs. This leaves time adjustment to GC 9.5. A. Specifically, GC 9.5.1 provides for time adjustments due to changes and extra work, whereas GC 9.5.2 provides for time adjustments due to quantity variations, and GC 9.5.3 provides for time adjustments for optional work. In all three cases, if agreement cannot be reached, the CA makes an initial decision, and final resolution of the allowable timed adjustment is made via the GC 17 dispute resolution protocol if necessary. Before we go back to the example, we need to clarify a fuzzy concept in the MMCD, that of overheads. Currently, the MMCD does not define overheads, but rather only general overheads, although both terms are used in the documents. As you can see by the GC 1.38 definition, general overheads are defined to exclude those overhead costs which relate to the current project. IT 10.1.3 makes it clear there is a distinction between on-site overheads and head office overheads. When giving quotations, GC 9.2.3 requires the contractor to price in all overheads and profits. But on the other hand, IT 17.1 warns the bidder not to include any costs not directly related to the optional work item. For example, site overheads. From these clauses, I take it that site overheads are both distinct from general overheads and are only to be included when tendering or providing a quotation under GC 9.2. Hence, my interpretation is that when force account costing allows a markup for overhead, it's to cover general overhead. If there are increased site overheads resulting from an authorized time extension to do work under force account, then those costs are legitimately reimbursable item by item, before the 10% allowed for general overheads. It is worth noting that when bidding, estimators will apply their markups for general overhead and for profit to all costs, including site overhead items. The site overheads are true project costs. They are just not specific to any one work item. They are hard, out-of-pocket costs on which markups are entitled. In the example which generated this topic, the project required a portable bridge for most of the duration of the project. This was clearly a site overhead cost. It was specific to this project, but it was not tied to any specific work item. The CA's dilemma was to determine if the daily cost of this bridge was entitled to be marked up at 10% plus 10% as the contractor requested under GC 13.1.1, or, since the work had been done under change orders, priced by force account, simply at 10% per GC 10.1.3 as materials required for the performance of the work. Now, if you followed my logic so far, you may be able to predict my recommendation to the CA. To do this fairly, the CA will have to review all issued change orders which authorized a time extension and classify those extensions either as being due to true owner-caused delays or simply time required to recognize an increase in the scope of the work from changes and extra work. For those days which were due to owner-caused delays, the daily costs of the portable bridge and any other site overheads are entitled to be marked up at 10% for general overhead plus 10% for profit, according to GC 13.1.12. For the other days, which were allowed due to a change in the scope of the work, the daily costs of the portable bridge and any other site overheads are entitled to be marked up at only a simple 10% under GC 10.1.13. In short, the cause of the time extension determines the allowed markup. It's not clear why the MMCD would structure the reimbursement in this manner, and I cannot find any helpful notes from our discussions on this topic in the early 1990s. Nevertheless, this is the way it is written for now. So unless there is a supplemental general condition to alter the language, this is the way the CA must apply the contract. To summarize, 1. A time extension awarded by a change order is not necessarily a delay. More often, it is a recognition of a change in the scope of the work. 2. GC 13.10 makes it clear that all of GC 13 applies only to true delays, not to changes in scope. 3. Changes in scope of the work will be properly covered by GC 7 for changes or GC 8 for extra work, with valuation by GC 9 or GC 10 and time adjustment by GC 9. This allows for price and time negotiations and/or formal quotations. If negotiations fail, pricing is by force account rules, and time extensions are initially set by the CA and finally resolved through GC 17. Even for true delays, the cause of the delay matters. Only delays which are caused by the owner or one of its agents are eligible for monetary reimbursement. 5. When work is being paid by force account and the project schedule has been extended, site overheads are reimbursable as additional daily costs for the time extension period. They too are entitled to be marked up as the relevant clauses permit. 6. The consequence of whether GC 13.1 or GC 10.1 applies is that the allowed markups are different. I hope this has helped clarify this contract consideration. Please check our website for further assistance and to see what other topics are presented in this series. Thanks for watching.